He used to leave early, return late, and talk in half sentences that led nowhere. The sound of the front door closing had become more familiar than his voice. I'd wait at the dinner table longer than I should, fork idle, plate untouched, pretending the ticking clock was a conversation partner. When he finally walked in, the first thing he did was unbutton his sleeves, not look at me. I stopped asking how his day was because the answer was always busy. It was always busy. And somewhere between "I love you" and "I'll be late," something essential slipped away without either of us noticing. That I used to count the small silences that sat between us, but eventually, I stopped counting. It became normal, like breathing without thinking. We slept side by side but existed in separate worlds. Even the air between us felt cold, polite, careful. When his phone buzzed, he turned it face down. I never asked who it was. I didn't have the energy to sound like a jealous wife when, in truth, I just wanted him to notice I was still here. Then there was his friend, Ryan's oldest, Zion. I had seen him dozens of times before but never like that evening when he came over for tea. Maybe it was the way he asked, "You look tired, are you okay?" Simple words, but they landed like something I'd been starving for. He looked at me the way people look when they actually want to hear the answer. I said I was fine, of course. I always said that. But his eyes lingered a moment longer than they should have, soft and aware, and for the first time in months, I felt visible. He laughed easily, talked about things that weren't spreadsheets or deadlines. I laughed too, a sound that surprised even me. It had been so long since I'd heard it. When he left that night, I caught myself smiling at the door long after it closed. It scared me a little, how something as harmless as kindness could make me tremble. Days passed, routine swallowed everything again, but his words replayed in my head. "You look tired." Such a small thing. Still, I found myself dressing a bit differently the next time he came by. Nothing drastic, just a touch more presentable than usual. When he complimented the tea, I said thank you too quickly. Ryan didn't notice. He never did. Zion and I started sharing small things, a text about a book, a passing message about a recipe, harmless details. At least that's what I told myself. His words carried warmth, the kind that filled the empty spaces Ryan left behind. I didn't look for it, it found me. I told myself it was friendship. But friendship doesn't make your hands shake when the phone lights up with his name. The first time he called me Aish instead of Aisha, I felt something shift inside me. Familiarity. Tenderness. The kind that doesn't belong between a married woman and her husband's friend. I should have drawn a line, but instead, I let it blur. We spoke about everything, how lonely marriages can feel, how two people can sleep inches apart yet live miles away. He listened the way Ryan used to, before his love turned into obligation. One evening, I found myself telling Zion something I hadn't told anyone. Sometimes I feel like I disappeared, but no one noticed. There was a pause, then he said quietly, "I noticed." Just that. Simple, steady. The kind of sentence that breaks something open. I didn't know what to say after that. From that night, my heart began reacting to his presence before my mind could protest. Every message, every glance carried weight. I became careful around Ryan, not out of guilt but fear he might see what I was feeling, though I doubted he'd care enough to look. It was subtle, the way things changed. He'd visit, and my pulse would betray me. Our words danced around what we didn't say. There were moments when silence did all the speaking, when our eyes met and lingered too long, when his laughter trailed into something softer, when my breath caught at the simplest touch of his hand passing a cup. The night he brushed my fingers, I froze. It was accidental, or maybe not, but in that single instant, something electric ran through me. I didn't move away. I couldn't. His eyes flickered up, searching mine, asking a question neither of us dared to voice. My hand stayed still under his, heartbeat loud enough to drown everything else. For a second, I forgot who I was supposed to be. After he left, I stood by the window for a long time, staring into the dark street, my hand still warm where his skin had touched mine. I wanted to feel ashamed, but all I felt was alive. It terrified me. I told myself it was a mistake, that I was just lonely, that it would fade. But deep down, I knew that something irreversible had started in that quiet moment, something that would demand to be faced, no matter how much I tried to hide from it, and as I lay beside my husband that night, his back turned to me as always, I closed my eyes and felt the ache of a truth I didn't want to name. Someone else had made me remember what it was like to feel again.
Days blurred together after that night. I carried on like everything was fine because silence was easier to live with than truth. The scent, the messages, the quiet distance, all of it became part of the air I breathed. I told myself not to overthink, that suspicion only ruins what's left of peace. But peace doesn't make your chest tighten when you hear his phone vibrate. It doesn't make you memorize every time he smiles at a screen instead of you. I began noticing the smallest details, things I used to ignore, his sudden care for his appearance, the extra cologne, the way he lingered in the car a little too long before coming inside. That he started mentioning new colleagues, people I'd never heard of. Each name sounded rehearsed, too safely placed in his sentences. I would nod, pretending I didn't notice. Pretending I didn't see how his eyes flickered away from mine when he spoke. The distance between us had turned into a rhythm, familiar, cold, predictable. I'd ask if he'd eaten, he'd say yes. I'd ask how his day was, he'd answer in one word. Sometimes he'd forget to ask about mine. Talia still called often, her voice warm, always checking in. She said I sounded tired, said Ryan must be lucky to have someone patient like me. I wanted to believe her words were genuine, but something about them brushed against a raw nerve I didn't know was there. She'd laugh about random things, tell me about her day, ask if Ryan still worked those late shifts. The way she said his name made my stomach tighten. I brushed it off as jealousy. Maybe I just didn't like how easily her tone softened when she spoke of him. One evening, Ryan forgot his phone on the kitchen counter while taking a call in the other room. The screen lit up for a brief second, just long enough for a name to flash. My heart stopped when I saw it, Talia. No last name, no message visible, just her name. It was enough. My breath caught between disbelief and denial. My mind raced to rationalize, to find any explanation that didn't mean what it clearly did. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe she needed his help with something. But coincidences don't make your husband hide his screen every night. When he came back, he grabbed the phone too quickly, almost defensively. I didn't say a word. My silence filled the room thicker than any confrontation could. He smiled, asked if I wanted dessert. I nodded. My throat couldn't shape a sentence. I studied his face while he spoke about work, his lips moving as if nothing had changed. Maybe for him, nothing had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember when I last felt safe in his arms. The truth was, I couldn't. Somewhere between all the long nights and polite mornings, love had turned into performance. I replayed moments with Talia, her laughter, her touch on my shoulder, the way she'd once said, if I ever find someone like Ryan, I'll never let go. At the time, I'd thought it was a joke. Now it sounded like a confession I hadn't understood. The next day, I watched him get ready for work. Every movement of his hands, every glance at his reflection felt like evidence of something unspoken. I asked if he'd be home late. He said yes, not even looking up. I nodded again, same routine, same silence. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled through old photos of us. The smiles looked like strangers. The warmth I used to feel seeing his face was gone. All I could see were versions of me trying too hard to look happy. Hours passed, and I found myself dialing Talia's number, but I didn't call. I wanted to hear her voice, maybe catch a tremor of guilt, but I couldn't bring myself to press the button. I deleted the number from my phone, then saved it again moments later. My heart felt heavier than my body, weighed down by all the words I wasn't saying. When Ryan came home that night, I was sitting by the window. He walked in quietly, no explanation for his delay, no glance at me. I asked if he'd had dinner. He said yes, same answer as always. I told him I'd waited. He didn't respond. Instead, he kissed my forehead, his lips cold, his gesture mechanical. I wanted to scream, to ask him why her name had appeared on his screen, but I couldn't. My silence had become my defense, my way of holding what little dignity I had left. Later, when the house fell quiet, I picked up his phone from the nightstand while he slept. My hands trembled as I stared at the lock screen. I didn't know what hurt more, the thought of finding something or the thought of confirming it. I placed it back before the risk became real. Some truths don't need to be seen, they can be felt. I lay beside him, eyes open, listening to his steady breathing. My heart was loud enough to drown it out. I realized that the woman he texted wasn't just a name, it was a piece of my world he'd handed to someone else. A betrayal that had started long before that message. The next morning, when sunlight touched his face, I looked at him differently. Not as my husband, but as someone I no longer recognized. The man beside me belonged to a version of my life that had already ended. And deep down, I knew I was no longer the woman who would pretend not to see.
The morning after should have been filled with warmth, with laughter echoing from relatives still lingering in the house, with me holding on to the glow of being newly married. Instead, I carried the heaviness of a secret I had no one to share with. Every glance I gave Ayan felt strained, every smile forced. He moved around effortlessly, greeting family members, playing the role of a husband as though nothing weighed on him. That perfect mask of his both fascinated and terrified me, how easily he could bury truths beneath his charm. That I noticed Saad that morning, standing off to the side, his eyes resting on me with a concern he didn't voice. He was Ayan's cousin, close like a brother, someone who had always been kind without stepping too close. But his silence had a shape to it, the kind of silence that carries knowledge it cannot share. Later, when I found a moment alone, he approached me carefully, like someone debating whether to pull a bandage off a wound. His words came hesitant, but they landed like blows. He told me there were things I didn't know about Ayan, things that would hurt, but things I deserved to hear. At first, I wanted to run from the conversation. The last thing I wanted was another fracture in the illusion I was already struggling to hold together. But Saad's tone carried no malice, only a reluctant honesty. He told me that even while Ayan had been preparing to marry me, he hadn't let go of another woman. The relationship hadn't ended when it should have. It bled into our engagement, kept alive in secret meetings, hidden conversations, late-night calls that family never noticed. My chest constricted as the words sank in. Part of me clung to the possibility that Saad was mistaken, but deep inside, I knew he wasn't. His eyes didn't lie, his voice didn't waver. I asked if it was Sarah, my mind desperate to fit the pieces into one betrayal instead of two, but his silence told me otherwise. This wasn't Sarah, it was someone else. A woman I didn't know, someone outside the walls of my world, yet someone who had been close enough to occupy the place I thought was mine alone. That I felt the ground slipping beneath me. First Sarah, now this shadowy figure I couldn't even name. The betrayal spread wider, growing roots into places I couldn't reach. I tried to steady my breathing, to keep myself from unraveling in front of Saad, but inside I was collapsing. He didn't say more, only muttered that he had kept quiet to protect the family, to avoid scandal. But watching me now, he could no longer carry it in silence. Then he left me with the weight of his confession, leaving me to drown in questions with no answers. That night, I searched. While Ayan stepped into the shower, I looked through his belongings with trembling hands, not sure if I wanted proof or reassurance. What I found was worse than I expected, another phone, tucked away in the drawer beneath neatly folded clothes. A phone I had never seen before. The messages were there, threads of conversations with a name saved only as an initial. Words of affection, late-night promises, talk of missed moments and secret meetings. Some messages were weeks old, others from just days before the wedding. The kind of intimacy that shouldn't exist outside the vows we were meant to share. My body shook as I put it back exactly as I found it, every nerve in me screaming. The walls around me seemed to close in, the room colder than it had been a moment before. When Ayan emerged, smiling, casual, wrapping his arms around me like nothing had shifted, I almost screamed. How could he look at me with such ease while carrying such deceit? His touch burned with questions I couldn't ask, his smile carved wounds I couldn't reveal. I tried subtle confrontations. I asked about loyalty, about honesty, speaking in hypotheticals, hoping he would flinch, hoping he would break the act. But he didn't. His answers were smooth, measured, almost rehearsed. His denial of any wrongdoing was wrapped in laughter, as though my questions were naive. He kissed my forehead and told me to stop worrying, that love was enough. And yet, the more he spoke, the less I believed. Every moment with him now carried a dual edge. His gestures of affection no longer comforted me, they mocked me. The promises he had made at the altar, so grand and public, now felt hollow. My heart replayed Saad's confession, the secret phone, the messages from a woman I couldn't even picture. What was I to Ayan, a partner, or simply a mask he wore to please his family while his heart wandered elsewhere? I lay awake again that night, my body stiff beside his, unable to surrender to rest. I thought of how marriage was meant to be built on trust, on truth, and how mine was already drowning in lies. The past with Sarah was a wound, but this ongoing deception was a disease spreading into the very core of what we were supposed to be. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the distance between us wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Ayan was hiding behind walls he had built long before me, and I was just beginning to see how high they really were. By the time dawn broke, my mind was filled with a chilling certainty. Love wasn't the foundation of this marriage. Secrets were. And I knew, with a sinking heart, that this was only the beginning of what I was about to uncover. This is section 2, almost equals 770 words. Shall I continue with section 3, 760 words, to complete the story arc with the final shocking secret?